Today, we're re-stepping into one of Europe's most powerful and tragic royal stories, the rise and fall of the Romanov dynasty. For over 300 years, the Romanovs ruled the vast, sprawling empire of Russia, a land stretching from the frozen Arctic tundra to the sun-baked mountains of the Caucasus, from the western borders of Europe to the very edge of the Pacific Ocean. But behind the glittering palaces and the heavy golden crowns lay a story of blood, betrayal, and a slow, inevitable collapse that would change the world forever. Our story begins in the year 1630. Russia was emerging from a period of utter chaos known as the Time of Troubles. The country was broken, leaderless, and desperate for order. In this moment of crisis, a 16-year-old boy named Mikhail Romanov was chosen as Tsar. His family, the Romanovs, were tasked with restoring order, and they did. They began a dynasty that would rule Russia for the next 3 centuries, building an empire founded on the principle of absolute power. In this system, the Tsar wasn't just a ruler. He was seen as God's chosen representative on earth, his will unquestionable. One of the most transformative figures in this dynasty was Peter the Great. He dragged Russia from a medieval kingdom into a modern European empire. He built a formidable navy from scratch, conquered new lands to expand Russia's borders, and founded the magnificent city of St. Petersburg, a window to the West, designed to rival the great capitals of Europe. But Peter's legacy was forged in fire and steel. His ruthless modernization came at a great cost, paid for through brutal wars and the blood of his people. He firmly believed that only through fear and an iron will could Russia truly be ruled. This belief would echo down through the generations of his successors. A century later, Catherine the Great would take that power to even greater heights. A German princess who seized the throne in a coup after her husband's mysterious death, Catherine became one of history's most brilliant and dangerous rulers. She was a master of politics and diplomacy, expanding the empire further, reforming the government, and turning Russia into a cultural powerhouse that commanded respect across the globe. Yet, behind the shimmering facade of her glittering court, a darker reality festered. Nobles schemed for power, peasants starved in the fields, and the whispers of revolution began to stir in the shadows, a faint but persistent sound that would one day grow into a roar. By the 19th century, the Romanov dynasty seemed unstoppable, an unshakable pillar of power. But the cracks in the foundation were already beginning to show. Tsar Alexander II, known as the Tsar Liberator, attempted to modernize the empire and address some of its deepest injustices. In a monumental act, he freed the serfs, over 20 million people who had lived as property on noble estates for centuries. But this great act of freedom, intended to bring stability, instead brought chaos and unrest. Radicals, believing his reforms didn't go far enough, targeted him relentlessly. In 1881, their efforts succeeded, and Alexander II was assassinated by a revolutionary's bomb. His son, Alexander III, was horrified by his father's fate and was determined never to repeat what he saw as a fatal mistake. He ruled with an iron fist, convinced that any concession was a sign of weakness. He strengthened the secret police, brutally silenced all dissent, and relentlessly pushed the doctrine that the Tsar's power came directly from God, absolute and divine. For a time, his policies brought a sense of stability to Russia, but it was the stability of a frozen lake. The surface was calm and solid, but underneath, the pressure was building. When fear is the foundation of a throne, even the smallest tremor can bring the entire structure crashing down. And then came Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia. A young, deeply religious man, Nicholas inherited a vast and complex empire that he never truly understood. He was a devoted family man who adored his wife, Alexandra, and their 5 children. But he ruled an empire of millions with the mindset of a private landowner managing his personal estate, detached from the realities of his people. When World War I erupted in 1914, Nicholas led his nation into a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. Millions of Russian soldiers died on the front lines. Famine spread like a plague across the homeland, and the people's ancient faith in their monarch shattered into a million pieces. Meanwhile, inside the palace walls, another disaster was brewing. A mysterious mystic, Grigory Rasputin, had gained immense influence over the royal family, particularly the Tsarina Alexandra. His presence at the heart of the court made the monarchy look corrupt, decadent, and even cursed in the eyes of the public. Vicious rumors spread faster than bullets on the battlefield. and soon, even the most loyal nobles began to turn against their Tsar. The dynasty was rotting from the inside out. In 1917, the inevitable finally happened. The dam of public anger broke. The army, weary from war and starvation, mutinied. Massive protests and riots erupted in the streets of the capital Petrograd. And Nicholas II, the anointed ruler of all the Russias, the descendant of Peter and Catherine the Great, was forced to abdicate his throne. After 304 years of absolute rule, the Romanov dynasty was finished. But the story doesn't end with the abdication. In the chaos that followed, as different factions fought for control of Russia, Nicholas and his family became prisoners. They were moved from one palace to another, their world shrinking until they were finally taken to a small, fortified house in the city of Yekaterinburg, deep in the Ural Mountains. And there, on a dark, terrifying night in July 1918, the last Tsar, his wife, and their 5 children were led into a damp basement and executed by a firing squad. It was the brutal, bloody end of the Romanovs and the violent birth of the Soviet Union. For centuries, the Romanovs believed they ruled by divine right. They built an empire of faith, fear, and gold, convinced that their power was eternal. But in the end, they discovered that they could control the one force more powerful than any crown, the will of the people. Today, the Romanovs are gone. Their magnificent palaces now stand as museums, silent witnesses to a lost era. But their ghosts and the profound legacy of their long and dramatic reign still haunt the soul of Russia today. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more journeys into the most compelling chapters of history. See you next time.